Donald Trump just offered Canada tariff relief, but the fine print has triggered outrage across the country. Because this was not a normal trade offer. This was not a friendly deal between two allies. This was a message to Canadian steel and aluminum companies. You can get relief from crushing US tariffs, but only if you help build more production inside the United States. In plain language, Canada is being told to choose between punishment and surrender. Pay the price at the border, or move future investment, future production, and future jobs south of the border. That is why Canadian steelworkers are calling it exactly what it looks like: economic coercion. And when the United Steelworkers said this was not relief, but blackmail and extortion, they exposed the real fight hiding behind Trump's tariff policy. This is not just about steel. This is not just about aluminum. This is about whether Canada still controls its own industrial future, or whether Washington can use tariffs like a weapon to drag Canadian factories, Canadian jobs, and Canadian economic power into America. For years, Trump has sold tariffs as a way to protect American workers. He tells his supporters that tariffs are about fairness, strength, and bringing industry back home. But when you look at what is happening with Canada, the strategy looks very different. Canada is not China. Canada is not a hostile power. Canada is America's neighbor, military ally, energy partner, and one of its closest trading partners. Canadian steel and aluminum are deeply connected to the American economy. They go into cars, construction, machinery, pipelines, defense projects, and infrastructure. These supply chains were built over decades, but Trump's policy is now turning that relationship into a pressure campaign. First, Washington puts heavy tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. Then, it offers relief. But that relief comes with a condition: build more inside the United States. So the tariff becomes more than a tax. It becomes a trap. It tells Canadian companies, your exports will be punished unless your future investment serves America first. That is why this moment is so dangerous for Canada. Because once a country accepts this kind of pressure, it does not stop with one industry. The anger from Canadian steelworkers is not just political noise. These are workers who understand exactly what this means on the ground. When production moves, communities suffer. When investment leaves, jobs disappear. When mills slow down, families feel it immediately. Steel towns do not survive on speeches from politicians. They survive on contracts, shifts, exports, and paychecks. So when workers hear that tariff relief could be tied to moving or expanding production in the United States, they know what is really at stake. This is not an abstract trade dispute. This is about whether a worker in Hamilton, Sault Ste. Marie, Regina, or Quebec can look at the future and still believe their job is secure. Trump's offer may be packaged as relief, but Canadian workers see the danger clearly. If a company is told it can avoid tariff pain by investing in America, then Canadian communities are quietly pushed to the back of the line. The factory may not close tomorrow, the layoffs may not happen overnight, but the future starts moving away one decision at a time. That is how industrial decline begins, not with one dramatic shutdown, but with a slow transfer of investment across the border. This is also a major test for Ottawa. Canada cannot afford to respond emotionally, but it also cannot afford to respond weakly. If the Canadian government treats this as a minor trade disagreement, Trump wins the bigger game. Because the bigger game is not just about lowering tariffs. The bigger game is about forcing Canada to negotiate from fear. Washington is basically saying, if you want access to the American market, then shape your economy around American demands. That is a dangerous precedent. Today it is steel and aluminum. Tomorrow it could be autos, energy, critical minerals, lumber, agriculture, or technology. Canada has spent years trying to reduce its dependence on the United States, but this moment shows how difficult that really is. The American market is massive, and Canadian companies cannot simply ignore it. But if access to that market comes at the cost of Canadian jobs and Canadian sovereignty, then the price is too high. Ottawa now faces a brutal challenge: defend Canadian workers without triggering a wider trade war, protect industry without hurting exporters, and show Washington that Canada is not a branch plant economy waiting for instructions from the White House. Trump's defenders will say this is just tough negotiation. They will say every country protects its own workers. They will say America has the right to use tariffs to rebuild its manufacturing base. But that argument ignores one important fact: allies do not treat each other like hostages. A fair trade negotiation is one thing. A tariff ultimatum is something else. When one country says, move production here or keep paying the price, that is not partnership. That is economic pressure. And for Canada, the danger is not only economic, it is psychological. Trump wants Canada to believe resistance is too expensive. He wants Canadian companies to believe the safest move is to invest in America. He wants Canadian leaders to believe the only way to avoid damage is to make concessions quietly. But history shows that once a country starts giving in to pressure, the demands usually grow. The next deal becomes tougher. The next concession becomes bigger. The next industry becomes vulnerable. That is why this fight matters far beyond steel. It is about the rules of the Canada-US relationship. Is Canada an equal partner, or is it expected to bend every time Washington turns up the heat? This is the moment Canada has to draw a line. Not with empty slogans, not with panic, and not with weak diplomatic language that disappears by tomorrow morning. Canada needs a serious industrial response. That means defending steel and aluminum jobs, supporting affected workers, pushing back against unfair tariff conditions, and making it clear that Canadian production is not a bargaining chip for Donald Trump's political brand. Because Trump's tariff strategy is not only about economics, it is about power. It is about showing that America can squeeze even its closest allies until they adjust their decisions to fit Washington's agenda. But Canada cannot build its future by constantly reacting to threats from the White House. It has to build strength at home, diversify markets abroad, and protect the industries that keep communities alive. Trump called it tariff relief. Canadian workers called it blackmail. And the truth is simple. When relief comes with the demand that your jobs, your factories, and your future move across the border, it is not relief at all. It is a warning. And if Canada ignores that warning now, the next economic attack will be even harder to resist. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe for daily update until the next time.